This is LSAT Prep Test 147, Section 2, Passage 3, about woodland clearings in the Mesolithic era. It's a medium difficulty passage because the ideas aren't really complicated, but the author's real argument doesn't fully show up until paragraph 5. If you read this passage waiting for a thesis statement, you're going to be waiting a long time. The argument assembles itself in pieces. Now, this is a science passage with a humanities angle. The author is dismantling the standard explanation for clearings and building up a completely different one from scratch. The main point is that the clearings probably weren't about hunting. They were accidental social spaces created by fear and foot traffic. Before we go through the paragraphs, you should know this. Paragraph 3 is the one that matters the most, and it looks like a detour, but it's actually the foundation for the entire argument. If you treated it like background on your first read, you're going to need to rethink it. Now, paragraph 1 does two jobs. The first half gives you the accepted view. People used clearings to hunt grazing animals. Fine, but then the second half tears it apart. The archaeological evidence doesn't actually link humans to clearings. Artifacts from the same time period have shown up nearby, but never securely linked. That phrase is doing serious damage to the standard model. And then the author adds, there's basically no evidence of animal processing at these sites. So by the end of paragraph 1, the accepted view is already in trouble. Now, most students read this paragraph as neutral background, but it's not. It is set up for a takedown. Paragraph 2 keeps pushing. The evidence people cite for the economic model is mostly ethnographic, not archaeological, and that distinction matters. The author is saying the strongest support for the standard view doesn't even come from the right field. But then catch what happens at the very end. The author pivots. Other ethnographic evidence might point to something totally different. Something non-economic. And that word non-economic is a signal flare. It tells you exactly where this passage is headed. You want to move through paragraph 2 at a pretty steady pace, but lock on to that ending. Now you want to slow down. Paragraph 3 introduces Yi-Fu Tuan, a geographer who says humans have always feared the wilderness. Not just modern people, but pre-literate societies too. And the author says if you apply that idea to the Mesolithic, your whole view of clearings might shift. Now here's what students miss. This is the core. Every single thing the author argues in paragraphs 4 and 5 runs on this one insight. Fear drives behavior. Behavior creates paths. Paths create clearings. If you don't absorb paragraph 3, the rest of the passage is just a list of claims with no foundation. And so when a question asks what this paragraph does, don't fall for saying provides historical context. It introduces the idea the author's entire alternative depends on. Now, paragraph 4 adds the mechanism. People moved through the landscape on paths. That is not new. But the author proposes that fear is what made those paths necessary. Fear of wildlife, spirits, getting lost. This is where the theory gets physical. Fear is not just a feeling anymore. It produces a concrete thing, a prescribed route through the woods. You want to read this carefully. The author is building cause and effect, and every link in the chain matters. Then paragraph 5 is the landing. The paths become permanent, activity clusters near them, and where paths cross, clearings form on their own. People cut corners, they stop to rest at intersections. And nobody planned these clearings, they just happened. Now, the very last idea in the passage, clearings as purely social phenomena, that is the author's answer to the question the passage opened with. That is the destination the whole thing was heading toward. You don't want to miss it. Now, the key move here is a cause and effect swap. The old explanation says clearings exist because of economics. Hunt animals, process food. The author's explanation says clearings exist because of psychology. Fears create paths, and paths create clearings. The hardest questions here are going to test whether you tracked that swap and understood which pieces connect to which. Now, the author's stance here is cautious, but it's still pretty clear. Words like may and alternative hypothesis soften the delivery. But you don't want to confuse soft language with a weak opinion. The author just spent 2 full paragraphs dismantling the old view before offering a replacement. That is not somebody who's sitting on the fence. Now, the main trap here is paragraph 3. Students either skim it or classify it as being tangential. It is the single most important paragraph for the author's argument. If a wrong answer says paragraph 3 provides background on human psychology, it's going to be tempting. The right answer will connect it to the alternative explanation the author builds afterward. Now, the second trap is mixing up what the author describes and what the author believes. Paragraph 1 spends a lot of time on the economic model, so a careless reader might walk away thinking the author supports it. but the author is setting it up just to knock it down. Now, before you hit the questions, make sure you're solid on these three things. First, what specific evidence problems does the author raise against the economic model? Second, how does fear connect to paths? And how do paths connect to clearings? And third, why does the author bring in Yi-Fu Tuan? What job does that reference do in the argument?